We have a presentation by Poulat Karimi from the World Bank, who unfortunately couldn't make it, but he was so nice to record his presentation and send it in. We have Val Kowalski, the founder of NAVE. We have Vinay Nanjia, who's a research team leader for soil, water and agronomy at ICARDA, but at the same time is presenting here today sustainable farming from the CGIAR, a new science program. And then Samira Ibrahim, the CEO of Sun Culture. And then last but not least, we have Peter McCormick from DWFI, who is joining us as a panelist as well. Mark, could I invite you to set the scene? You can stand up or do it sitting.
Okay. Thank you so much, Petra, and really pleased to be part of this session on what I find to be a really intriguing topic, and I'll explain why in just a moment, and very pleased to see a dialogue around this challenge here at the conference. So what I mean by that is a dialogue around the challenge of producing more with less, which implicit in that is how do you move water out of agriculture, which I think was the original title.
Sensitive.
I know, that's why I'm raising it. So it's a sensitive topic, but it needs to be talked about, and it needs to be talked about because because there are contexts where over allocation to agriculture means that other sectors are struggling and are trying to get their hands on water, and there's competition. Because agriculture is a major driver of water diversion from ecosystems that causes biodiversity loss. Because there's contexts where, because of climate change, the future availability of water is uncertain, and water risks are growing, and investments in irrigation may not be sustainable. They may not be wise to make because of future changes in water resources. So, politically sensitive topic, but scientifically something I think that we need to take responsibility at this point as research institutions and ask what are, I think, really credible research questions is how can you be successful in moving water out of agriculture? And this is a complex puzzle. It's a complex puzzle for how to go about doing that. It's not as simple as raising efficiencies to free up water, because that tends to lead to the expansion of irrigation for perfectly understandable reasons. And as I said in the morning in my presentation, for those who may have seen it, part of this puzzle therefore involves being able to move multiple levers that are part of how you can deliver more with less, produce more with less. So multiple levers, including diversifying crops and crops with lower water demands, creating incentives for farmers, changes in governance and regulations and institutions, and then data and deploying data to help people make decisions that empower them, or using data to empower them to make decisions that can assist with this challenge. So in this session, we're focusing on that last dimension, the data and digital opportunities that are created as the as I'm sure everyone knows, the really rapid changes in digital technologies that are underway, and how we can harness those for confronting this challenge. So how will these technologies help? How will they change the puzzle that I've described? What's possible now? What's possible in the future? And what's not? This isn't going to fix everything. That's certainly the case. So it's a very timely discussion, a very timely session, as I said at the beginning, and really looking forward to the next hour and a half with you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So Naga, can I ask you to help kick us off with a presentation and your vision? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Petra. Thank you, Mark, for setting the scene. Really helps. Green one, okay. Okay, so that's the story. We're going to talk about how we grow crops with less water, and also when water is moving out of agriculture. So these are the two things that I'm going to touch on, and then I'm going to show some digital innovations that IWMI as an institution is trying to bring in to solve the problem. So on the slide here, you see that is an assessment by Wiles et al. 2021, which shows increases in water use across different sectors. So globally, it says that there's a 55%, there will be 55% growth in water use across all sectors. But if you look into the details, the water availability for irrigation is reducing from 67% to 37%. And this is one of the many estimates. I mean, we can argue about that, but then this is a significant decline, right? I mean, it may not be 37%, but maybe 57 or whatever it is, but there is some decline happening. And then how do we deal with the situation when there is less water available for agriculture? How do we produce water to meet the demand or to close the food gaps? And on the other side of the spectrum, you see that the water use is increasing, and mostly that is increasing happening in the domestic sector. Domestic sector itself has grown like more than 600% over the last 50 years. And this domestic sector and then the other sectors where the water use is increasing, actually we are encroaching onto other sectors like environment, where we really need to maintain the water for biodiversity and other nature purposes. And that's why we are seeing that the overshoot day is like coming down every year, so we have less water available for all the uses. So in this case, we're trying to focus mostly on the domestic sector, and then this domestic sector, the problem is actually growing, and it's a global problem right now. So there are studies that basically indicate that around 200 cities globally are having water security issues, where water is not sufficient, they're not being met by the groundwater aquifers, so there is more water that is being diverted from elsewhere to meet these demands, right? And then the map in the middle actually shows where these water scarcity exists, and on the right side, there's an article that talks about the implications of that water decline in cities, causing an implication or ramification on food production. And that's what we are actually aiming at. And believe it or not, this is happening globally. And this slide basically highlights how and where water is actually moving out of agriculture. So in the US, it's happening already in the West, where water is being taken out of the Colorado River Basin or from other river basins in the West, and it's being moved out for meeting the demands in Los Angeles, in San Diego, and some of the cities in California. And the box, the color of the box basically tells you where the water is going. It's either going to domestic or industry or environment. And it's happening across all the globe for different countries. So what are the real impacts of moving water out of agriculture? Here I highlight really 4 big ideas. There is a loss of agricultural land, there is reduction in the yield and food production. It also impacts the food security. And then for the individual farmer, if he's not producing food, he's not producing income, it's actually an economic constraint for him. So it's also a loss of livelihood for him in some cases. So how do we minimize this disruption? There are different things that we are trying to address here. I'm not going to go into the details of it. It's a busy slide. But one of the things that we are trying to do, that number 7 of it, if you go into the details, is basically providing data to the farmer so that he can make an informed decision. And this is already happening, and we have seen a lot of farmers talk about yesterday and today, who have actually talked about how much of data they're collecting in order to make some informed decisions. But there is a digital data divide across globe. I mean, there's farmers in US are doing an amazing job. They have all the data they have to make an informed decision, but farmers in Africa and Asia and Latin America, they don't have access to that data. So what are the solutions the data can offer? We are basically trying to address the smallholder farmers who don't have enough water to produce, and help them how to produce with the less water that is available by providing some real-time data. And the idea is to provide or democratize the data so that we can shift the decision making into the hands of the farmers. That's exactly what we have already seen with the farmers in the US. How can we do the same thing with limited technology with the farmers in the global south? So these are some of the portfolios that IWMI is addressing. We are looking into monitoring the impacts of agriculture, shifting changes in agriculture. We're into water conservation. We are doing water sustainable management. We are also trying to increase the reuse, because wastewater is a steady supply of water. across all the seasons, because we consume water and we produce wastewater. We're trying to divert that into agriculture as well. So we are trying to increase, through different projects, increase the treated water or reuse water into agriculture. And then we are also emphasizing on water reallocation. And this reallocation can be happening from cities to ag, or ag to cities, and then depending on how the needs are. From now, I have like few slides that basically talks about some of the assessments that we have done. And this is the assessment that I did in collaboration, partnership with the USGS a few years ago. They're looking at the Palo Verde Irrigation District in California. So where we use remote sensing data, Landsat-based ET evapotranspiration to understand the water consumption or consumptive water use. And you will see that across from 1995 to 2005, the color, brown color, is increasing. And what it means is that brown color is basically less water use. So you see that the brown color is increasing, that there are fields which less and less water use. This is happening because farmers are registering into the fallowing program. So there is a fallowing program in place where there are payouts paid to the farmers in the West, where they keep for keeping their fields fallow. Now, the right side, the bar chart, basically tells you how much of water is saved. So we have done, using the remote sensing assessment, we have done the crop water consumption over different years, and you see that post 2000 and 2005, the water consumption has gone down. That means there is savings. So the bottom bar plot basically tells you the savings, and also converts that savings into the amount of dollar amount that needs to be paid out to the farmers, and also tells you amount of population that it can serve in terms of domestic water supply. This is one example from California. This another example is looking at the impact of irrigation curtailment. This is also another program to curtail the irrigation in the Klamath River Basin in Oregon, where we are looking at the water savings. It was implemented in 2016, but then it was successful only for 1 year. For some reason, the payouts were not successful. That's why farmers did not stick to the program, so they came back and started cultivating it, so that you see that the water savings have gone down. So this is another example. So and then few examples from Africa and other regions. So this is the tool that we're building. It's called Securing Water for Agriculture. So we're looking into crop water use. In the middle, the figure that actually shows an amidst irrigation scheme in Ethiopia, where we are trying to plot per plot within the irrigation scheme, per plot, whether water is sufficiently supplied, whether there has been an overuse or excess of water use or optimal water use. We're trying to do this assessment based on remote sensing observations, and trying to develop a tool that can actually inform irrigation managers on how to reallocate from the excess fields to the deficit fields. So there is a possibility of reallocation within the scheme, because there is an uneven distribution of water. Some farmers take more water, some get less, and we are trying to provide a tool so that they can reallocate this water. And this is another tool called Sustainable Water Resource Development Tool, is basically trying to limit overuse of groundwater. This is an example from Zambezi River Basin, and the color is flicking, it's an animation, and then the number below the map basically shows the crop water requirement. And based on the crop water requirement, you can basically tell whether you can grow a high water requiring crop versus a low water requiring crop. So any pixel that is in green color is where you can grow based on rainfed conditions. Any pixel which is yellow in color is basically where you need groundwater or surface water irrigation, and where if it is gray, that means you don't have enough water to grow crops. So you see that as the crop water requirement goes high, the color turns gray. That means you can't really support high water requiring crop in all places and all the time. There's another tool, it's called Vegetable Irrigation Climate Resilience. This is another tool that embeds, that looks at and informs farmers on where they can grow vegetables and how much of water is available. And if water is not sufficient, in order to do supplemental irrigation, what kind of technology needs to be used, whether solar pump or manual pump or fuel pump or whatever pump is available there, so whether it can be used in that particular location or not. So it's a very detailed modeling assessment that happens behind that, and we are trying to provide this kind of information to the farmers. This is another example where you can build a digital support system for especially reallocation. So you need to understand, like, okay, if I'm using more water for the city, what will happen, what is the impact in the downstream irrigated areas? how much the irrigated areas will receive. So this is an online tool where you can actually run the model for different scenarios and understand how much of water reduction will happen for agriculture. And this is another concept that one of my colleagues is actually developing, looking at the freshwater wastewater swap, which means it's taking water from the city, from agriculture, supplying it to the city, and then taking the treated water back to the agriculture. So we are developing some frameworks around this. And this is a holistic framework. We came up with a concept called WaterREPEAT, where basically it stands for water reuse planning using earth observation and AI-based technologies. It's an end-to-end framework where you can actually look at multiple demands from multiple sectors, from agriculture, environmental, and industry, wherever you have water demands, and see how much of the treated water can supply to different sectors. So there is a water potential mapping, or prioritization mapping and planning embedded into this tool. So these are some of the tools that we have been preparing and delivering through different platforms, and some of these tools are already available online. If you want more information, please reach out to us. But these kind of tools are really required to go forward and provide these kind of assessments and provide these details and data to the farmer so that they can make some informed decisions, and then they can grow crops with less water. Thank you. These are the key messages, but I'm going to stop there.
Thanks, Naga. Next, we're going to have a bit of a deep dive on how planet data really can make better decisions in the field. Val, the floor is yours.
Thank you. How do I control it?
Sorry, I made a mistake, man. It's afternoon, I need another coffee. We're going to listen to Poulat for a second, who has a recorded video, and then I'm going to ask you back on stage. I'm so sorry, Val. This is when I'm looking at the panel in order. I'm like, yes, order 1, 2, 3, 4, and I forget.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Poulat Karimi, and I'm a senior irrigation specialist at the World Bank. I lead our work at the Global Water Practice on water informatics and data. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you today and share some of the examples of how we use data and innovation to support our investment projects and also client countries with you. I'm going to focus on 3 countries today. Those are India, Kenya, and Georgia. And I'm going to share examples of tools and applications that we have developed, and I can fit in the 7 minutes time that I have. I've used remote sensing products and layers, as well as the information that we have collected from the ground, to produce a web platform that allows you to run irrigation performance assessment across 3,000 plus irrigation schemes in India, and for multiple years. The information that the platform would provide includes project information, land cover, land use, understanding of evapotranspiration, looking into precipitation, water and land productivity, and also getting into irrigation performance indicators such as adequacy and equity. As you can see, you can select any state in India, then within those you would choose your command area, and you can also have a choice of what sort of crop layers you want to use and what time period you want to run this report and information for. And it will generate automatically a report that would detail the situation of the irrigation scheme that you have selected in HTML and PDF format. It also allows you to run this for as many as schemes that you want, and then run a query and produce an output. This tool has been developed in collaboration with the CWC and is currently being scaled and used by the government. Each automatic report generated by the tool include many maps, many graphics, many tables that carries information about very well-known indicators such as cropping intensity, equity, adequacy, biomass, and water productivity, and also actual evapotranspiration. And these maps and data are made available through the report for both downloading as a TIFF file and information that you can post-process, and also as information that you can use readily in decision making. The next example product is water informatic dashboards. We are developing these water informatic dashboards for client countries that are working with us, and they have an interest in having sort of one-stop shop for a lot of remote sensing based information and data layers that we have. Here we collect a collection of information on that relates to water counting. These are precipitation, evapotranspiration, biomass, water footprint, water productivity, land use, land cover, and also try to get into information about drought condition and irrigation performance in a way that kind of collects everything under one umbrella. What we have done here is to make sure not only the data is available and accessible at the country scale, but you can choose any basin, any sub-basin, or any admin level like counties in Kenya to be able to tailor-make the output to those selections. So once you choose a basin or sub-basin, everything in this dashboard gets recalculated for that selection. The intention here is that we move away from remote sensing and geospatial data analysis being restricting the applications to making it very much accessible to whoever can operate a web browser but has a need for understanding of the data. The next example is from Georgia. This is where we have developed a countrywide irrigation performance assessment and water counting tool, where we had many schemes to be prioritized for investments. We used our analytics to be able to map the crops to understand how much water is being consumed by those crops and which part of the schemes are getting irrigation service or lack of it. As you see here, the black areas are those that are receiving irrigation, and those that are not in that color, those are the areas that irrigation service doesn't reach. We have used this with high resolution information, so you're able to zoom in and then see on each plot whether they are, what sort of crops are there, and whether they are actually being irrigated in that season and that year. And there the visualization allows you to kind of see the layers behind, to be able to kind of look into whether this information is accurately representing your area or not. We also have made it possible through this platform to also look into the raw satellite the images to provide the specific information that the user might need. As you can see, you can select any region through the tab that exists on the user input side, select a municipality, be able to zoom into that area to see what are the crops and what sort of practices are being done. Finally, a big part of our work to zoom in on capacity development and institutionalization. This is what we are working towards. The goal is to enable the countries not only be able to replicate the process that we are doing independently, but also have institutions and units and departments who are custodians of these methods and be able to do this over a long run and sustain the use of innovation and data in decision making. Thank you for your attention to this presentation, and please get in touch if you want to learn more about the content of this presentation. Thank you and have a good day.
Sorry, Val, can we do it again? This time it really is your turn.
All right. So here I'm gonna take you from a global perspective more to the local one, but still a little bit outside of this country, just north of the border in Saskatchewan. And here I'm going to represent a project that we had between Nave Analytics, that I represent, Planet Labs, our partner, and Saskatchewan Water Security Agency. Here's the slide they shared with us. Water Security Agency is an agency that was just created in response to unprecedented expanse of irrigated acres in Saskatchewan. The chart on the right shows that now it reaches about 25,000 acres per year. And in response to this growth and serving the need of ecosystem and equity of water distribution in the state. They created the agency and mandated them to manage 12-inch per acre water allocations per season, which they took seriously and started the preparation. How do they manage that with all the available technology? So they came to Nave Analytics and the Planet with the pilot project on 2 sites. The 2 sites were rather small, all in total about 2,500 acres, mostly growing cereals on them with several types of irrigation available there. There was a few fields that weren't irrigated. We didn't know that, but well, that was all part of the pilot. All the tricky parts were later figured out within the project. Again, you can see that there are pivot irrigation, there are sort of fallow land waiting for its time, and there is also drip irrigation there on the south of one of the sites. What we deployed in there is called institutional solution out of Nave Analytics in partnership with Planet. And what we typically do in our commercial operation is deployment of Planet data in parallel with some deterministic modeling. Out of Planet data, we sort of get an alternative estimate of soil moisture content across different depths. So combining that with deterministic one, we got sort of a best of both worlds. So typically, we report this data and help Nebraska growers make their informed decision about irrigation. This time, we were playing a guessing game of trying to estimate how much water was withdrawn for irrigation. And the way we do it, the way we approached it, we simply looked at our historical records and look at the historical records shared by the Saskatchewan Water Security Agency, and we try to characterize conditions when growers irrigate. Since our system can perfectly capture all elements of water balance, we were able to characterize this condition, come up with an empirical model that would tell us how much typically growers would irrigate in that area. And based on this information, we were able to generate sort of weekly reports that would tell how much water is being lost, how much precipitation is coming, how much irrigation is deployed, and on the bottom, on the right, you can see that's sort of storage, water still available for irrigation, right? So in addition to that, to those time series, we provided final report where we simply told the agency how much water was applied for every acre and how much water was actually delivered or withdrawn for irrigation of each field. Now, how did we do? Right, we did not know how we will be judged, but at the end of year we were revealed validation data that would be coming from sort of alternative control sources of water meters and control boxes, standard control boxes that come with the pivots. Here in this chart, you can see all the technical particularities and the cost that comes with each particular device. And on the rightmost column, that's a characterization of our service. And it looks like talking about less for more, we were able to perform the same service for way less money than, let's say, compared to the water flow meters and irrigation control boxes with telemetry devices. Here's some details of how we performed. So here's comparison between each of the group of validation data across different sites. We performed quite comparably well to the biggest, most precise reference. That's the water meter, right? So we were able to be within 15% error, and this kind of accuracy is acceptable for those who manage the allocation. Additional point that we are able to deal with forecast and project a little bit, so that allows to be prepared for and to allocate infrastructure resources for pumping water and prepare service people to go to and talk to growers about slowing down on withdrawals. So avoiding conflicts. That's how water savings operate. You can also see, well, on the rightmost graph, a little flat line at the end. That was almost the cost of the conflict, because the grower decided to apply irrigation before his winter crop was sown, and we could not capture that due to technology limitations. So we're not perfect, but we are still 85% accurate, and that's what goes in that conclusion that I hope you will have the chance to get familiar with after you get the access to the materials of the conference. But right now, I just want to mention that this technology is available and scalable, applicable, and deployable anywhere in the world. Planet is coming up with the new planetary variable at a 20-meter surface water content. This will enable these services in a smallholder farm. And this makes me excited, because this is now becoming relevant in the regions where need this kind of technology the most. It's very affordable, and please come to us. We'll be happy to work with you.
Thanks, Val. And we are going to teleport ourselves to the Global South, Vinay. So who are we making most use of digital? Thank you, Val.
Thanks, Petra. So I'll be talking about how water can be an enabler, how we can de-risk agriculture by wisely managing the water resources. So when we're talking about more with less, it could be either more yield without needing for extra water, or it could be less water but achieving the same yield. But in the ideal world, more yield as well as less need for water. That's what we are aiming for, and that's what the smallholder farmers are aiming for. So there's a perfect storm heading our way. If you look around, because of the climate change, increasing population, changing dietary patterns, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of pressure that is being put on the natural resource base. At the same time, you see, like, if you see Africa, African citizen average age is about 23, whereas the African farmer's age is about 63. So the farmer is aging, and people are not really interested in doing agriculture. An African farmer earns only 6 cents on every dollar worth of food that he produces. So it's not a very attractive profession to remain in. At the same time, we are losing about 23 hectares of land per minute to salinity or to land degradation, desertification. So when you look at all of this, the odds are very against us, and water availability, like water is a finite resource. It's not like water is being created or it's disappearing. It's just the distribution is such that the scarcity is on the rise, the demand is on the rise. At the same time, we are trying to produce more food for more people and for livestock, for meat-based diets, etc., using the same amount of water. But on the flip side of things, there's a lot happening outside of agriculture that gives us hope that there is a solution on the horizon. You have 4G network available everywhere. The cost of sensors are coming down. The remote sensing imagery resolution, high resolution images are becoming increasingly affordable. Cloud computing is becoming increasingly faster. So it looks like there is hope. There are solutions outside of agriculture that can be brought into agriculture to help have these digital solutions, precision farming, etc., that could be an enabler that could help solve this puzzle. And water has its own problems. It can be the water scarcity, too much or too little can be a problem, but at the same time, polluted water is a problem on its own. So water can be a challenge, or water can cause challenges as well. So according to where you are, your solutions and your problems differ. If you look at different parts of the world, if you go to sub-Saharan Africa, you find very little irrigated agriculture. So the coping mechanism that the farmer is dealing with are all around rain-fed agriculture. If you go to Central Asia, there's a lot of irrigated agriculture, and you have problems associated with salinity, high evapotranspiration, leakage, and delivery losses and all. So depending on where you are, the farmer is trying to have different mechanisms of coping with water demand supply gap. There is too much, too little, incorrect timing, and how do you bridge all these kinds of stresses? So I'm trying to talk about a CGIAR science program called Sustainable Farming. What we are trying to do here is that we are trying to see how agronomy can be a solution provider, but not very site-specific agronomy, how you can use digital tools, how you can take dashboards, how you can come up with recommendations that are developed to solve problems in one context, but you can take the learning, you can take the tools elsewhere and redeploy without having to reinvent the wheel. So we are trying to see how we can prioritize water allocations, how we can do some on-farm trials to fine-tune equations, how we can come up with regression models to predict disease outbreak, what is the level of residue retention that can bring you maximum moisture retention without having to lose too much of residue which you could have otherwise fed to an animal. So those kinds of questions we are asking, what are these thresholds, where are these limits, what are these equations that you can develop for one context, but you can quickly transpose it to another context. So in that sense, I'm going to just give to you a few examples, mostly from Africa, but one from Latin America and one from India as well. So here's an example where we try to introduce the concept of conservation agriculture. It's very commonly practiced in Brazil, in Australia, and in many other parts of the world. But when you go to Africa, the residue is precious. You can easily sell it, or you can feed it to an animal. So there is a competition for it. So where are those thresholds where you're trying to understand in a dry year, if I were to keep 10, 15, 20% of this residue retention, this cover that can prevent moisture escaping from my lands, how does it bring, in a dry year, how I can maintain a yield, how I can have, even in a dry year, close to a normal yield. So what are these thresholds we are trying to understand, and using remote sensing, we are trying to see where are the hot spots, where can you have best return on investment, where if you were to introduce conservation agriculture, it will be beneficial to you. Here is another example where a farmer is simply trying to do bunding of his fields. So we are trying to see if you do bunding and you can do rainwater harvesting. So when it rains, you're not letting that moisture escape and let it seep in. And using simple techniques like broadcasting or trying to grow some kind of a marginal crop, you are trying to earn a dignified livelihood. So you're using land leveling techniques, you're using bunding techniques to conserve that soil moisture and not let it escape from your field. So these are simple techniques, but we are trying to introduce in farmers' field. You may think like this is not rocket science, but even in Africa, you don't find people practicing these things, and they can make a huge difference in their ability to adopt and cope with the water demand supply gap. Here's another example, which is from Morocco, where I live. Morocco recently decided to have 1 million hectare under conservation agriculture by 2030. It was an ambitious announcement, but they didn't know how to translate this into a recipe. What are the steps to follow? Where are these areas? What will happen if people start adopting conservation agriculture? Where's the farm machinery? Why would somebody want to invest in a farm machinery? Can we have an Uber kind of a model where a farmer has to rent by the hour or by the hectare and need not have to buy that machinery? All these kinds of questions had to be answered. Develop a dashboard for monitoring, for reporting purposes. What should be the role of the World Bank? What should be the role of the youth? What should be the role of the private sector? So we had to come up with a roadmap to introduce conservation agriculture as a solution. And what we have seen through trials is that conservation agriculture really in a dry year tried to keep the yield stable, help do some carbon sequestration, try to store some of the moisture, improve the soil health. So it was really good, but it's just that it takes a while to see those benefits. How do you encourage a farmer to remain invested and not do it only for one growing season and then stop doing it? So those kind of questions we try to answer by doing studies, by coming up with roadmaps, trying to do digital stuff. Here is another example where we try to introduce supplemental irrigation. So usually, crop is planted when the rainy season begins, but as the crop is growing, you reach a point where the rainy season is ending, but the crop still needs water. So in an unusual year, this end of rainy season might be a little early. So if you have rainwater harvesting, if you have a pond from where you can lift water using either solar irrigation or a diesel pump, you can apply a small amount of supplemental irrigation and it can increase your crop yields by 3 to 5 folds. So it's a huge return, but then how do you tell a farmer how to adopt supplemental irrigation? Because it's something that you don't do all the time. It's only in a dry year that you need the supplemental irrigation. So how much water do you store? Where do you build that pond? How do you lift that water? At which growth stage do you apply this water? All those kinds of questions need to be answered that we try to do to introduce this, and we try to see that the forage that was produced and when it was fed to the animal, the amount of milk that was produced, as well as the quality of the nutritive value of that milk and the meat improved significantly when they fed this animal with the forages that were produced using supplemental irrigation. Here's another example, but for the sake of time, I think I'll start moving a little faster. But this is for keeping mulch, and that's how you try to have some carbon retention at the same time moisture retention. Here's an example where we were trying to introduce the concept of farmer-led irrigation, small-scale irrigation. But the problem is the upfront cost of irrigation is very high. Almost the pump alone is 40% of the drip irrigation system. So the farmer is somewhat reluctant to invest that kind of money, especially those who don't have access to microcredit. So try to come up with business model, try to come up with smart subsidies such that you can give loans at a subsidy where farmers can use the irrigation system as a collateral itself, and then they have a good gestation period, and especially if it's a woman, if it's the youth that's asking for loan, you give them preference, and then you can introduce this kind of a farmer-led irrigation system, in this case, in Ghana that we try to do. This is an example that my colleague Manohar already touched upon, where we look at the water availability limits. So first we see how much rainwater is available. Is it sufficient this year or not? If it's not, then let me see if there is water in the river basin or not. Then if there is water available, I use that. If there isn't available, then I look at the groundwater resource. Can I lift some water from there for applying for irrigation? So you try to look at options of where is the water available. Is it within the limits? Can I issue an advisory? Can I develop these maps? Where are these places? Where are these farms where I can take this water, whether it's from surface water, groundwater, or from rainfall, and that can be used for application to the crop, and I can save my crop that year. So it's a decision support tool. This is, I think, my last example. It's from India. How are we doing on time? Last example, okay. This is from India, where we tried to develop a smartphone application where we were we were asked to come up with a solution where you can optimize the inputs, and that can lead to increase in the farmer income. So we tried to come up with using geospatial tools, looking at regression models, looking at the weather. We tried to send out advisories for weather forecasting. We tried to look at the evapotranspiration loss, field capacity, wilting point, and tried to say how much and when to irrigate. We looked at the weather pattern and came up with regression models to say what's the probability of a disease outbreak and what can you do about it, pesticide application, etc. We looked at the soil NPK, we looked at the crop NPK requirements and how much fertilizer should be applied and in which ratio should you be applying. By doing that, what we have seen is that and this is how the application looks like, but what it led to was 15 to 20% saving in fertilizer, 1 to 2 savings of irrigation doses that led to about 15 to 20% increase in the farmer's net income. They were able to de-risk their operations, and most of the times, the most popular advisory that they wanted was, what's the weather forecast like? Can I call somebody to level my fields? Can I call my labor to do the sowing and things of those kinds? So I just wanted to give you a flavor of a variety of things that we have been trying to do all over the world that is helping use the water in a smarter way and try to stretch that water to the extent possible so that you have more crop per drop. Thank you so much.
And I'm sure during our discussion you can give many more examples of all the new toys you're developing. Samir, last but not least, could I invite you up stage to give your vision on what digital could mean?
Hi, everybody. Still with me? Okay. So for context, I run a solar irrigation company in Africa for now, looking at other emerging markets. We sell and finance solar irrigation for smallholder farmers. So these are farmers that have 2.5 acres or a hectare of land. They live off-grid and they live in rural areas. We sell and finance and provide services for these irrigation systems. We work with 60,000 farmers across primarily 3 countries in East and West Africa. We'll be at over 100,000 farmers by the end of next year. I'm setting this context so that when we talk about data, it's always quite a sexy conversation. People really like to talk about big data and data analytics, et cetera. So instead of talking about why we collect data and the type of data we collect, I thought it would be interesting just to share some real live examples of what we're doing with our data to help inspire you to think about how you could use data in your own work. Because I think, and I've pulled different examples from different parts of our businesses, just get the juices flowing. So we collect over 100 data points from each of our customers continuously. This is everything from repayment data to pump usage data. All of our systems are remotely connected, so they're all IoT enabled. Behavioral data, data on why they bought from us. So 100 data points continuously. And this is kind of turned into an engine or a data engine for us to understand where this emerging consumer market is going. So I'm just going to share some examples, no slides. You unfortunately have to stare at me, of how we use our data and the kind of things that we do. So groundwater has been talked about a lot right now. As you know, groundwater or water level depletion is often an early indicator of drought. All of our pumps are fitted with a sensor, and most of our pumps are submersible water pumps. So they go in a water source, so lake, river, boreholes, well, water harvesters. When there's a drought coming, often the water tables will drop, and the sensor in our pump will let us know that the water table has dropped. Now, why is this interesting? So from a customer, it's obviously interesting so they can know that they need to dig a little bit deeper. But if you aggregate all of our data across all of our customers, this could be an early warning indicator for governments. It could be an early warning indicator for national and local governments to understand what they can do with water resources. We've partnered with Petra and the International Water Management Institute to better understand how solar irrigation impacts groundwater. And we're working to develop abstraction rules, guidelines on how governments should think about water, and hopefully build more of a policy framework around, okay, you have this data, now what do you do? because I think data for data purposes is a horrible idea. But there is a lot of use in this when you think about national water resource management. From a financing perspective, we can do interesting things like correlate asset utilization with repayments. So when I say asset utilization, I mean how someone's irrigating. Irrigation is a farmer's business, so we understand how a farmer is conducting their business. What we've learned is that by analyzing how the farmers use their irrigation system, so when they irrigate, how long and how frequently, we can identify patterns and predict repayment outcomes. So what that means is we can tell if someone is going to be a bad payer mid-season. The thing with financing is a lot of banks, they use fancy terms like origination, which is basically them pattern matching you. So they'll say, okay, Samir has this type of house with this type of roof, so I'm going to give him this type of loan. But Petra has this type of roof, so I'm going to give her that kind of loan. With smallholder farmers, a lot of the value is created during the season, and a lot of the risk needs to be managed mid-season. So we're able to now proactively support customers in case they fall behind. We can restructure loans mid-season, and it helps us build a stronger credit model. I think this is part of why our collection rates are so high. We have 96% collection rates. Something I said in the panel before is many people look at me and they say, oh, smallholder farmers in Africa, they are horrible customers. I'm never going to lend to them. They're really good payers. They really like paying back because this is their entire livelihood. And understanding the behaviors that might help them become better, so how to use the irrigation system more effectively is one way we use data. As you know, geography plays a significant role in shaping the buying patterns of farmers all over the world, not just smallholder farmers. So variables like soil type, altitude, rainfall variability, access and distance from infrastructure all influence how farmers operate their business. So how they grow, what they grow, when they harvest, how intensively they irrigate, etc. So by layering geospatial data and demographic data with usage and repayment data, so you have this interesting stack of data, we're able to not only improve our own sales and service strategy, which is important, but also identify where other companies should focus when entering the market. So we've started to now realize that as we have bundled services, insurance, inputs, offtake, it's become an interesting sort of data perspective where we can help companies pinpoint which regions and which farmers have the appetite for these types of products based off of all the data we collect. We've already started offering additional products and services in a bundle. So we offer health insurance. We're building a parametric weather insurance model to start giving farmers access to insurance if there's droughts or floods. We're going to start doing loans for agriculture inputs. What we found in this is we can now analyze how different products and services influence overall behavior, including credit performance. This sort of cross-product behavioral information gives us quite a nuanced understanding of which offerings add values to farmers and which they want to pay back, so how to manage their credit. It also helps us intelligently recommend products based off of farmers' profiles. So what we've noticed has been exciting for other companies is a lot of companies ask us, how do we sell to smallholder farmers in Africa? And what we've realized is this sort of data that we have has become a game changer for them. We haven't partnered with any large organizations yet, but there are conversations in helping them understand who to sell to, when to sell to, and how to sell to them. So which bundles lead to the best financial outcomes. We call this like a treasure trove of data, and we think it's a rare window into the insights of the smallholder farmers. The way this kind of works in practice right now, if you kind of put all these different things together, is I'll give you one example. So a farmer buys an irrigation system from us. We collect all this data from them. We help them become good payers. Once they've paid for example, 6 months well, they might become eligible for inputs. So we offer them a soil test. The soil tests, 90% of our customers interact with us digitally. You can't see this from that far, but maybe those of you in the front can see it. They have an app. there's no way you're going to see this. This is a horrible idea. They have an app, and the app gives them information like when their next payment is due, how much balance they have, et cetera, et cetera. It also, we can send things to the app. So we send them the soil test digitally, for example. The soil test pops up. It says they need X, Y, or Z. We can also now start saying, cool, you need these inputs. Go to your nearest agro-vet, and we'll finance those inputs. Here's a voucher for you. We already have data on the repayment. We have data on what they need from an input perspective driven by soil tests. We have data on how close, and this is very practical data, how close they are to the nearest agro-vet. And then they go, they get inputs. We add a small amount of payment to their monthlies, and they get inputs. And then they go home, they use their inputs. And then we can also push them information on how to use those inputs. So we can give digital trainings. There's a partner we have that we're pushing digital trainings that are both WhatsApp-based and video-based. So there's this whole sort of like very almost basic way of helping farmers get access to information that we take advantage of all the time. We could just turn on YouTube and search some things, or we have access to World Bank data and incredible amount of graphs, but smallholder farmers don't. But they have smartphones. 86% of our customers have a smartphone, and they're engaging with us via not a feature phone, a smartphone. And I think the importance of that is immeasurable. And I think it gives us a lot of really interesting ways to think about how we actually engage with people that we thought may be poor and not tech savvy and really hard to reach. They're actually quite easy to reach. We just have to know what information to give them. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. So we heard quite a vast variety of different solutions at different scales for different audiences. Oh, you forgot something. Yeah, I thought you had a second slide up. 1 minute.
I don't know if you can see this. This is a slide from an investor deck, so it's really text heavy. So please don't try to read the text. It's going to hurt your eyes. Oh, thank you. So this is actually a screenshot of the app. But one thing I want to leave you with is an interesting idea around gamification. So we thought about what if we could take the worst of social media and apply it to helping smallholder farmers remove the inefficiencies in smallholder farming. Farming is an algorithm. The problem with the algorithm is that the variables are changing all the time. So rain comes, rain doesn't come, this pest outbreak, that pest outbreak. What if we could help give farmers advice? Now, giving farmers advice is a very bad business. Farmers never want to take advice, smallholder farmers, because you can't charge them for it, and if you're wrong once, you're in big trouble. But because we understand their behaviors and we can correlate things, like I said, asset utilization to repayments, we can start doing things like incentivizing them to irrigate better. And the reason why we can incentivize them with points that can then transition into money is because we know how much we're paying for a bad payer. Because we are the lender, we know how much it costs for us to service the loan. So we have this bit of money we can use to play around with to say, okay, if we can service a loan for less by incentivizing good farming behavior, wouldn't that be interesting? We haven't rolled this out yet, but we've been prototyping it for a couple of years, and it's in the app. And the way it would look is you sort of get points for doing things, and the more points you get, the more money you get. But I'll leave this like wild idea in your head. Can you take the worst of what we see in social media today and applying it to incentivizing people? Because the world runs on incentives. And if you have some money to play with because you understand the cost of not doing it, you can take that money and spend it on figuring out how to improve yields. Sorry, I'll let you now continue.
Thanks, Samir. And on that bombshell, I'm going to turn to the audience to see if you have any questions for any of our panelists before I start shooting out my questions. But is there any question from the audience? Yes. Hold on, I'm going to walk over there. There are mics here. If you could.
I'm going to direct my question to Sun Culture. And first of all, thank you so much for having so much passion and drive. I mean, you can really tell from how you're speaking. My question relates to your data. And this is something that's just, again, you have wild ideas. But if you could encrypt your customer data and imagine that you could provide only that data that's valuable to, let's say, drought prevention, and you can see early on that we have indicators here that are looking like there might be a drought. Would you be able to consider selling that data to third parties, such as governments?
Yes, is the short answer. For us, the important thing is, how do we then bring that to farmers? So selling data is really interesting because we can use that to subsidize the cost of products and services to farmers. So it is something we're thinking about, and what we have to think about is it more valuable for us to keep or to sell? Stuff like the water data, really easy example to say we could sell that. And we have to go through the process of debating the public good versus the selling of it. But yeah, absolutely. It's something we're thinking about and considering across all of the data we collect. And thank you for the encouragement.
Peter, you want to come in? No? Go ahead.
I think we need to bring in the word politics to this discussion, because this is a big issue here, and we have to be very careful about these sort of things, rightly so. If we think about this river here upstream, the Platte River, the Twin Platte irrigation system, as I was listening to this, they've been very progressive in collecting data, meters on every well, but you have to be very careful about this. We also, the way this river is governed and managed, it's very well developed and so forth, but it's contentious. There's a transboundary element to this between Colorado and here. And the farmers, many farmers here in the past have allowed their information to be collected and kept at the NRD. Then when there was a lawsuit with Colorado against, and you heard about the groundwater, surface water connections, well, this became clear that the Republican River was overpumping the groundwater and caused this problem with the surface water. All the farmers then had to, their data was then used against them. So that, and then there's a bigger picture here is about who owns the agricultural data. You saw all these combines with all the data that's being collected. 1 minute, estimating the yield every minute being harvested. Who does that belong to? Is it John Deere? Is it the farmer? Is it the state? Is it the Natural Resource District? It's pretty much the legislation is coming down on the side of the farmers. But more importantly, Billy Tiller, who's one of the consultants working on the Twin Platte River, he talks about how we make progress in these decisions and moving things forward in these areas. And his phrase is, progress moves at the power of trust. And a lot of what we're talking about, we have to think about the trust element, about the data and how we use this, and how if we expect to be at the table as the water folks at the agricultural table, you have to build that trust. And that's why I had a bit of a problem with the title of the session around moving water out of agriculture. I think if you start with that conversation, you're not getting to the table.
About democratization of data exchange. Encryption, unfortunately, is not a solution, because encrypted data may lose its meaning and the value if you do that to this. Right now, I can tell you that there is almost like a band of enthusiasts in the geospatial world that are working on the technology that helps to anonymize geospatially referenced data, meaning that it's going to be registered, all the patterns locked. You can do learning from the data. You can do any kind of assessment rating with it, but you will never be able to re-identify the original location or original owner. Kind of like stray cats, right? You can see that the animal purrs and meows. It's a cat, but you will never know where it comes from. So these initiatives exist, and please reach out if you guys have some particular applications. I can connect you with the group, and you can be part of the pilot.
One more thing on that, like conceptually. The reason, and I probably should have gone into it when I answered the question, but when I said, can we use revenues from whatever we sell to subsidize farmers, the concept emerges. People have heard of universal basic income. There's a group of folks thinking about universal basic data income. So if you, as a human being, own data, Can you then sell that data for income? And what within legal boundaries, there is interest for our customers to figure out how they can use things that they sell, like the carbon credits they issue to us to sell to pay them, to keep subsidizing things. And I think as a concept, data is another thing that they can monetize for their benefit. There's a lot of politics and rules being drafted around it and the methodology around it, but as a philosophy, we think that it's interesting to monetize. If farmers can monetize more things that they're already doing, they can afford more technology. So that's sort of the concept that we believe in.
Thanks, Samir. Oh, I think you're spearheading another question.
Yeah, I have a question to Sun Culture. So you've said you're actually selling out, you're selling submersive pumps to these farmers. What is their source of water? Because I know it's actually a challenge for them to actually find the source of water, because that's why you're seeing most of the common pumps used are solar pumps that kind of gets the water from the ditch and then they pump it and put it on the crop. So if you're talking about submersive pumps, they have to dig a well. What is the cost of digging the well for a smallholder farmer? The other thing, they have to maybe dig an harvesting tank, maybe a rainwater harvesting tank. That takes cost. So do you help them to actually put in place the source of water before you bring in your pump?
Where are you from?
Uganda.
Yeah. Very, very knowledgeable about the state of play. We have both submersible and surface pumps. So the surface pump is a portable pump that can be used in the case where water is somewhere else, for example. We are not in the business right now of helping people find water. Africa is a very unique continent in that it's the only continent that has an economic water scarcity versus a physical water scarcity right now. There's a lot of groundwater. I think the research you did was something like 100 million solar irrigation pumps around the size that we're talking about now can be deployed without depleting groundwater resources for other industries. It's an incredible number, and we only need to install a fraction of those for the entire continent to become food secure. So there's a long way to go. We don't find water. We work with people that have access to water. Most of our customers have hand-dug wells, so they'll hire people to go and dig 10, 20, 30, 40, 50-meter wells with their hand. And the wild part is that the people who dig the wells bring banana leaves down with them because they oxidize faster. So there's less oxygen when you get to 50 meters down, 150 feet. So the well diggers bring banana leaves, so it oxidizes, so they have more oxygen down there. That is it's very dangerous. That's the most common source of water for us. We are talking to some companies that are looking to do shallow water digging with these manual machines, because when people dig wells, they get charged by foot. So if you're digging a well with hand by foot, depending on the season, it's a few dollars per foot. When you're digging with a borehole, it's tens of dollars per foot. So it gets quite expensive, but we don't deal with that part yet. In terms of storage, many folks we work with have access to water tanks, legacy water tanks from before. We're thinking about financing them, but we also have a battery product. So instead of storing water as potential energy, we store energy in the form of battery chemicals. So farmers can irrigate in the evenings and not necessarily have to store water for usage later. So they can pump and irrigate and pump and use for domestic use whenever they want because they've stored power in the battery that's charged by the sun. So that's our way around having to do water tanks because they're quite expensive, and is adding an added utility of allowing them to irrigate in the evening. So less evapotranspiration, use water for domestic needs at night. They want to cook, bathe, drink water, etc. And you have chargers for lights and phone chargers.
Thanks, Samir. Okay, 1, 2, and then 3. I'm going to go from left to right, just making a shortcut here.
Thank you. I have a question. This is kind of going back to the question about monetization of data, and
and confidentiality and those issues. And one of the challenges that I often see as a researcher and talking to people about this is that the value of any one person's individual data is really very small, and the value comes from when we aggregate across a lot of people. So how does that play into these decisions about, possibly taking that revenue and then bringing it back to the farmers? And I also often see that the individuals who have that data don't often recognize that each piece on its own is not that valuable until you have that combination, until you have that aggregation.
Who wants to take this? Well, go ahead.
Well, okay, I will answer that. So the answer is in standardization and data coming from farmers. You're absolutely right. If it's just irrigation records, if you don't know in what condition they were collected, it is essentially meaningless. Therefore, the data has to be embedded into standardized context. Standardized context, that's something that characterizes, let's say, the water balance, energy balance, I don't know, matter balance, depending on what you can afford. But there are standardized packages that this data can be embedded, locked in, anonymized, and then put for sale. That's at least the perspective that I can share now.
Does anybody want to add before I go to the next question? No? I think there was a question somewhere around here. Yes.
I have a very quick question for CGIAR. Your presentation gave various examples of using sensors, conservation agriculture, etc. And I don't remember which case study, and correct me if I'm wrong, might have been Morocco, but you referenced a potential increase in yields from these practices of about 10 to 15%. And I'm just wondering if, every innovation, every method, every model has objectives, and I'm just wondering if that's kind of what you're looking to achieve from these practices.
So that particular example was from India, and it was for rain-fed crops. And the problem with the Indian production system was that the government subsidizes fertilizers a lot, especially urea. So the objective was firstly to have a balanced application of fertilizers, and secondly, not to over-apply urea because it was subsidized, farmers were abusing it. At the same time, if you can predict an ideal planting date, you can actually have very high yields. And at the same time, if you can send out an advisory for supplemental irrigation, that also helps a lot. So a combination of all these, having the right fertilizer application, planting at the right time, advisory on when to apply supplemental irrigation, that's what led to 15-20% increase in the crop yields in these cases. So we had some beneficiary farmers, and then we had some spillover farmers and some that did not participate. And this increases between those that did not participate and those that were the target farmers. So it was done over 6 growing seasons, and these are the average over 6 growing seasons. Yeah.
Yes.
My question goes to the next 3 speakers after Dr. Smith. So I was wondering, what are your monitoring and evaluation mechanisms like? Because some of these projects, they have lifespans, maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years, 5 years. So how do you ensure that after the project lifespans, the farmers continue to use the product, the decision support tools you developed, such that your effort in collecting geospatial data, agronomic data, soil moisture data to build these decision support systems have not gone to vain?
Thank you for the question. Very important, very important. What we do is, for most of the projects where we work, we have a strong mandate of working closely with the stakeholders, and we have a mandate of co-development and co-designing these tools.
So what we do is we start from the beginning of the project, we work closely with them, we try to customize these tools to address the specific needs of those stakeholders. So we are trying to get their buy-in right from the day one and trying to co-build these kind of tools. One thing that we take care when we are deploying these kind of tools, most of the time we are deploying in the global south. We are working with the ministries of water, ministries of agriculture, or some NGOs or some developmental agencies. Whenever we work with them, we check what kind of technology and the capacity they have. And then we try to provide the training and then capacity that is required to maintain this tool beyond the project time frame. But as you rightly pointed out, most of these development work or our support ends with the project because we work on the projects. But then we try to ensure that they have capacity and expertise to maintain this tool and run this tool. And we also ensure that we use technologies that are less cost or cost-free technologies, that they don't add cost in maintaining these kind of tools. So let's say we deploy an online tool for an agency in Africa, for a ministry in Africa. We don't want to add an extra burden of, for them to spend some X amount of dollars every month to maintain this online tool. So we go with a cost-free technology, cost-free architecture, so that there is no cost involved for them. There are a lot of public platforms, open source networks, open source tools that are available. So we prioritize of using those kind of tools. So that's why sometimes these tools that we deploy may not look like as sophisticated as the commercial tools that are available out there, but then they're customized to meet the specific needs of the stakeholders or farmers. Thank you.
Does anybody else from the panel want to answer before I go to the next question? No? Okay, then I'm going to run through the door.
Samir, to you. Have you ever visited recently in Walmart or Sam's Club or Costco here, any grocery store? Do you know that they have every day they change their display in the front or any part of the corner of the store? Someday, don't get surprised when you see diaper and beer together next to each other on Thursday in the summer season when the construction is going on. So oftentimes it looks stupid for us what they are doing, but they are very smart. Otherwise, they cannot exist in the business. They use their thousands of customers' data point each day, and they develop some kind of modeling from there because every big, those shopping centers has their data mining expert. So back to you. Thank you for working with the smallholders because of the risk of adoption and return on investment. It's not a joke to have that there because historically, every organization, they want to work for return on investment with the progressive and affluent farmers. With that, the way you described everything, you have a number of data points and millions of data you have by now, I believe, at least. Have you ever tried to look at those data and try to develop a model that can be useful for yourself, for your business, to the farmers, and to the similar organization? They want to work with the similar smallholders with the background, experience, and holding of similar size. Please share the lesson you learned.
Thank you for the question. The short answer is yes. Some of the ways that I described is how we use it for ourselves. So most of the way we use it for ourselves is to figure out how do we get our customers to improve their payments and add value to them. We use data to decide what geographies we launched into, where within a country we set up shops, who we hire, how we market. I mean, everything that we do, every decision that we make is driven by the data we've collected. It was not at some point you have enough data to build it. I think whenever someone says they have a good data model, it's really just as good as the data that you have. So we just happen to now have a lot of data. From a customer perspective, I shared some examples. The main ways we're helping them is to improve their farming practices. that's a really big area of opportunity because they don't necessarily have access to all of the tools we talked about here. So how do we synthesize the data that we have in small actionable insights for them? Most importantly, we're using it to offer other products and services. So, and this goes to sort of the third part. At the end of the day, farmers in sub-Saharan Africa are just like us. When they make more money, they want to buy more things. And they're asking us for more things. So we're using our data to build credit models to allow them to purchase other things on credit using our relationship with them. What I was alluding to at the end of my short talk was what I think this becomes is a go-to-market strategy for other companies. I think there's a lot of interest in understanding this emerging consumer market and how people sell things to them. Now that we've started offering other people's products and services on credit, we're now able to develop the same sort of insights that we use for ourselves, but for other products, which then translate into other companies. So, for example, we're going to start financing inputs in July or June. So, because we're going to start financing inputs, at some point, we'll have enough information on the behaviors of farmers who are buying different types of seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, etc. That can be used for the big chemical companies to understand what to sell to who, where, for example. So I think what this evolves into is sort of a data engine for go-to-market for other companies. And I think we continue to be the access point, or we become the access point for them reaching smallholder farmers. It helps our business because we solidify a relationship with our customers, but it also helps our customers get access to things they otherwise wouldn't get using our credit model to facilitate that. So it's sort of a win for everybody on the chain, which is, I think, the only way it works. We won't be selling diapers and beer, though, but maybe other types of things that increase productivity.
Or helps nutrition. Thanks, Amir. There's going to be one last question, and I'm sorry, we need to really wrap up. So after this question, I'm going to hand over to Mark Smith. Yes.
Real quick, thank you. I wanted to get back to something Mark alluded to, which was urban areas, cities taking water away from ag. And I got excited about that. And we haven't touched on that. So let's touch, if we could touch on it really quick. And so that's related to where I live, Colorado. And in the West, we see urban areas taking away water from ag. And it's happening, and it's going to happen. And so the data part was part of it. That's going to happen, but ag can produce the same amount by using less water. And in some aspects that I've seen in Colorado, big irrigation companies actually retain information so that they can retain their water supplies, right? Out of risk of sharing it to the state or to municipalities who can take it. So that's like, I wanted to ask about if you have another aspect, a region in the world, probably an arid region, just touching on how does ag react to urban areas, looking at their supplies, and if you want to touch on data as well.
Go. You want to take that, Mark, and then wrap up straight away? Or does anybody else want to take that question? Naga.
As I said in the presentation, I mean, it's happening all around the world, and I can quote some few examples here. So Mexico is one country where Mexico City is running out of water every dry season. There's always a fear of day zero there. So recently, Mexico government has come up with a national water plan, and they are mandating to review the concessions. Concessions are the water rights in Mexico that they give to different, growers, water users associations, and so on and so forth. Review their use to identify overuse or underuse, and to divert the water from agriculture into the domestic purposes for the cities. And obviously, not a whole lot of data is available there, and then even if data is available, not everybody is ready to lose their share of water, right? The way it happens in the West, in Colorado, in the California, is that there are really payouts that encourage farmers to participate voluntarily, come and sign up, and then they get a benefit of financial benefit in terms of not growing crops.
But then in Mexico, it's not really happening that way because there are no incentives, financial incentives there. So the data, first of all, the data is not available to monitor. But then if you ask me, are they, voluntarily ready to lose their rights? The answer is no. But then the first challenge there in the rest of the world as well is to generate that kind of data. And that's what we were presenting, like how we can use data, Earth observation and AI to generate that kind of a data so that we can, make some decisions for that. It's not going to be easy. The road is going to be bumpy as well as, the data is fragmented. That's the challenge there.
Thanks, Naga. Mark, can I hand over to you, please?
Sure. Thank you, Petra. Yeah, Petra teed me up to both kick off and finish this session. So thank you. And thank you to all the presenters and the questions and the great discussion just now. So a few observations from me. And the first is that it's clear that there are new frontiers in water management, in agricultural management, in opportunities for farmers, etc., that are being opened by data. So data's empowering changes in management. It's enabling services for farmers, financing for farmers, de-risking of water and climate and finance. It's enabling water allocation and reallocation decisions, as we've seen, at a certain scale. So data is an enabler of change in agriculture, in access to finance and technology, in the dialogue on problem solving and who comes to the table with which kind of information, and therefore pathways to solutions. It's an enabler of change for food security, for water security, for income security. And so that list of things that I've just read through, that's a lot. You can do a lot with these new technologies and the insights that they're driving and providing and the creativity that there is around how these data resources are collected and used and how and for whom. But not by itself. Data, it doesn't achieve all of those kinds of potential outcomes by itself. It needs the kinds of examples that we've just been learning from today. It needs farmer-centric approaches with co-development as part of that. It needs the innovation around that. It needs the incentives, the private sector. It needs trust is really key. But there are challenges around all of this, I think, that we haven't touched on today, and this picks up on the point about cities that you were just raising. A lot of today's discussion, most of it has been around the way data relates to agriculture and farmers and what's possible. But also there are other sectors that have an interest both in what we've been talking about today and in the opportunities that are created by these kinds of innovations. And that may be cities, it may be conservation. How will river basin organizations use these kinds of technologies at a different scale with a different set of stakeholders? How are these kinds of technologies changing the way that transboundary water management and sharing and the issues and challenges around that are being tackled and shared, whether that's between Colorado and Nebraska or between, as is in the news, between India and Pakistan, just to pick something difficult. And then a sort of insight that I had from the discussion is that one of the contrasts one of the things that I like to flag with people that aren't so familiar with water is that water is very political. On the one hand, it's technical, but it's also very, very political. And it's the same with data. On the one hand, it's very technical, but it's also really political. And maybe that's because both move, as we've been hearing about. They move and they exchange and they're cycled and they're applied and used for different things. But also data, something extra from data, is that it can inform the politics for better outcomes when that's alongside trust and alongside institutions that enable in a political sense, enable those better outcomes. So I think what we've had today is hopefully the start of a really wide-ranging dialogue about what's possible from these kinds of topics for the future. Thanks.
Mark? Yes, thanks, Mark. And thank you to all the panelists and all the speakers for the super interesting examples. And thank you all for joining today's session.